Today, I'm going to talk through a Flashbang build. Hey everyone, Derpy here, welcome back to another Battle Parts video. It has been roughly a week since the VXP targets. By the way, TSM did a pretty good video, actually a great video on the VXP target. I would go and watch that through if you have not already. As always, all the stuff I'm making here I've not tested, I've not played with. I actually hardly hit any VHP targets this past weekend, and things could change completely when the flagship comes out, although it probably won't. I'm going to offer you 3 general build archetypes, as well as show you the build that I'm planning on using myself, talk about upgrade levels, and of course show you the Kixeye hash code for this and all my builds, which are in the builds document I have in the description of all my YouTube videos. Now, getting right into this, what you're seeing on screen now is sort of the core build, and I'm going to walk through this very quickly to show you what I have on here. First things first, I actually have the regular weapons on here because I don't have any of the limited ones. I just couldn't afford the time last raid to go get them. Obviously, you have limited ones, they will do 20% better, they will have more damage, and that should be the only difference on there at all. You also do have, and notice this has a range of 93, you have a heavy weapon right here, the heavy gas blaster, which has a range of like 36. In my opinion, this is going to be a trap to lure you in faster, and you have all the enemy ships do massive damage to you when you're really close on range. I would much rather just kite them and stay away. But because you can't put anything else in this slot that really makes too much sense, I mean thermonuclear launcher, whatever, a few other things that maybe do some concussive damage, it may be worth putting the Death Strike heavy torpedo in here, although I doubt it. I'm just going to stick with the heavy gas blaster and probably just not use it and not intentionally drive close to things, although we'll have to see how that works in the raid. Moral of the story is you can feel okay about skipping this if you don't have the points. In terms of the specials, we do have the Wave Splitter engine on here, which is going to just be the best tier 11 skirmish engine out there. If you don't have this, use the tier 10.5, tier 10. Just make sure you match the combat speed on that one. Now, I should also mention here that the next special, the blowback assembly, is not actually in the TLC, at least in the first day that it came out. And the second best for the blowback assembly, which is limited, would probably be something that reduces spread, increases splash, and increases projectile speed, which sounds a lot like Explosive System 4, would probably be my second best option on here. The next special is the Shadow Strike system. This increases concussive reload and damage. Liberty Belt or Advanced Concussive System 3 would be the second best options for this one here, just whatever has the highest concussive damage and reload out there. Now, the unlimited special that came with this ship is the Gutter Chute Exhaust. This is a sort of concussive reload version of Hyper 30, and that's the second best special I would use, although I really like the 35% combat speed on here right now. Now, that's the standard build here, and we have to talk about a few things. One of those is antis in this target. So you have 2 choices for countermeasures. One of those is the Gale 4, and one of those is the Cormorant. The Cormorants do not fire at smart torpedoes. Let me say that again. The Cormorants do not fire at smart torpedoes. I think there were a handful of regular torpedoes in these targets, but if you put these on here, they will be for decoration only, or for backwards compatibility in older targets, or even future targets. I would not use those on your ships, period. The second option is Gales. Now, there were some mortars in this target, but they have a very high countermeasure evasion stat on those mortars from what we've been seeing in the VXP targets. This means if you want Gales to be effective, you need a lot of them, and they need to be boosted by a special. You need to boost Gales by a special if you have them on here. If you don't boost them, you're going to have a really sad time. And for reference, the specials I would go for is something like the Pteros defense system or the Hydroatomizer nozzle. So if you have Gales on your ships, you need to use a special if you want them to be effective, otherwise just go for more straight up weapons. So that's my thoughts about countermeasures, and again, if I was doing a countermeasure 1, I would be building 4 ships or 3 ships like this one with the Pteros or the Hydroatomizer nozzle on there. I'd probably lean for the Pteros, even though you don't get the concussive reload. This is the special weapon setup I would go for countermeasures. All but one ships built like this one probably leave the flagship blank. But this is not what I'm going to build. I'll show you the build option number 2, which is actually just a pure straight damage build that's using more Gatling guns, and you can go on here and do something that just adds concussive damage, and you should have quite a few options here, at least if you didn't have any other things equipped. So concussive damage will have a few things, one of which is concussive upgrade, that just straight up adds 10% in terms of being helpful here. There's a few other things. Skirmish battery adds 25, and some other random things. If you go into limited, you do have the impact overdrive, which is by far and away the best one, far better than Bushido battery, because this has good synergy with the critical chance and concussive damage if you don't already max out on criticals. So the weapon and special setup right here, which I've shown you, which has a critical chance of still 50%, so you're not maxed out there at all, this is the damage version that I would go for. But that's still not what, this is still not what I'm building. What I'm building is going to do two things over this build right here. It's going to have more speed and more splash. So splash is pretty important because these are depth charges, and they have a splash value on there right there, 15. They also do have a splash minimum, which means if you hit within that splash radius, you're going to do some damage. You do less damage if you hit further away, just like throwing a hand grenade. You do less damage if you miss the target by a fair amount. So we can increase your splash of your weapon by putting on splash. Now, this is pretty interesting because there is an interesting special that has not been out for a while, which allows you to combine both splash and combat speed. And this is the Nuclear Accelerators 2. Side note, if you just wanted a pure combat speed version, the 35% or 30% from the insulated charge capacitor is what I would go for. But the splash here is very, very helpful, although it does weigh a ton, so watch out. And this gives you 25% combat speed. Other options you can do also, which of course need to be done across the entire fleet. If you are changing anything on your ship, you need to do it across the entire fleet. Now, I like the idea of putting on 2 of these V-mortars, D75 V-mortars, which give you 10% bonus combat speed. This is, I think, a really good idea because it will have the same number of regular weapons that Kixeye is tuning for, 8. They assume you're putting on 2 countermeasures, but this will give you 10%, 10%, and 25%, which turns out to be a very high amount of bonus combat speed on your ship, so you can outrun the mortars much more easily. You can outrun the rockets much more easily. By the way, sprints and tridents do not fire out rockets in these VXP targets. So you can just outrun much more of the damage. You can outrun the concussive depth charges. You can dodge the smart torpedoes far more easily with this build on here, and you really just have a much better combat speed up to 112, which I think is very, very nice and is the way to go for this build and is what I'm going to be using. I will finish with putting a note out for armors. I did not get a chance to play around with this build too much at all in this VXP target, so I'm just going to recommend the 2 armors of each. I've got no idea which one's going to be leaning a little bit further. If I was guessing, I would say explosive damage will be sort of the skill element you have to avoid, and concussive damage will be the constant, but I could definitely be wrong on that in this target. And I almost wanted to switch my answer now. So there's the build. A few final notes is that we did get a ton of upgrade build tokens, etc. for sort of free this time around, depending on the upgrade level of your previous ships. So make sure you're using that to your advantage. Make sure you are either using or spending your Forsaken Mission tokens. I'll talk about that in a second here. Smartly, you should use at least 2 weeks on the flagship, maybe even 3, unless you're expecting what I'm expecting, which is a garrison hole around the corner. In terms of upgrades, U1 is nearly worthless because the heavy weapon slot is not good. I don't like the heavy weapon in this target, and it gave it a quite funny name. U2 is fairly important. You get some concussive damage. By the way, the 65% only modifies the base stat on the whole. It doesn't work like a special. And the survival is nice. U3 gives you even more survival, but that's less important. I think you want to get ship up to U2, next ship up to U2, next ship up to U2 before you move anything to U3, and definitely don't have anything at U1. I would rather have 1 ship at U2 and 4. I'd rather have 1 ship at U2 and 4 at U0 than 5 at U1. I think U1 is really just not that good of an upgrade. So I've let you know my thoughts, my three sort of archetypes for this build here, the countermeasure one, the damage one, and then what I plan to build, which is the speed one. Of course, you could totally just get screwed with any of these, so you can always just build the core element right here, leave off that last special, decide if you want countermeasure, damage, or speed, and take off the D75Vs, leave these countermeasure slots open here. Wait until we see the flagship stats come out. I highly doubt there'll be anything surprising in there, but you can always do that. Now, I did say FM tokens and garrison hole. I am strongly expecting the next garrison hole, if not in the June raid here, to be in the July raid. I would put more money on it being in the June raid because we won't have the next siege skirmish assault version in this raid right here coming up in 2-3 weeks, whatever that is, July 14th. It should be in the July raid, is the garrison hole, is my guess, rather than being in the August one. We've already had the June raid, which is what we got these holes in, I think. So I would almost encourage you to try and save more FM tokens than usual for the last minute until we see the raid prizes, so you can see if you want to stockpile and spend a week's worth of tokens on garrison, rather than using that to finish up your flashbangs. Just a few items to think about there, with your standard method of saving the upgrade tokens from the TLCs, build tokens from the TLCs, etc. And you can always earn, 10 of each upgrade and build for the flashbangs in the raid, but you may want to consider saving your garrison tokens. I hope this video helped. If you do have questions, go ahead and let me know. I'm definitely trying to get back into the cadence of uploading Battle Pirates videos a little more consistently over this next month. With that said, I want to say thank you to everyone whose name appears on screen now. They are the people who make this channel possible. Anyway, and until next time, this is going to be Derpy signing out, helping you be a better pirate.